Thank you for tuning in to the Jeremiah Bible Study. We are in chapter 19. This is a little bit of a shorter chapter, so it won't be too long of a session this week. But let's start with reading with verse 1. Thus says the Lord, go and get a potter's earthen flask and take some of the elders of the people and some of the elders of the priests and go out to the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is by the entry of the potsherd gate, and proclaim there the words that I will tell you. Last week we talked about the potter and the clay, and we're continuing that theme. Jeremiah is not chronological, so I don't know if this happened directly afterwards, but it very well could have, or perhaps it was put together because it shares that same theme of pottery. Regardless, here we've got something that's not a pliable clay anymore. It's now a fired vessel. So what you have is a big difference. When clay is fired, it's now something that has to either be used or discarded. If you've made a mistake, it's too late to go back. I mean, obviously with God, all things are possible, but it's too late to go back and rework that clay. You're talking one of the most inexpensive materials in the world being clay. One of the cheapest vessels to make would be a clay pot, although today their earthen vessels are pretty expensive just because they're more art pieces than practical day-to-day pieces like they were back then. But he's taking it and he's going out to the Hinnom Valley. And we've talked about this before in Jeremiah. This is the valley where the child sacrifices were taking place. This is the lowest, most despicable thing that the Israelites have done. In this particular case, Judah, which is particularly bad because it seemed like Judah was the good one when the nation was divided into Israel and Judah. Judah generally had, some bad kings and some good kings. Israel had almost all bad kings. Israel went into captivity during the Assyrian invasion. Hezekiah was there, good King Hezekiah, and he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord spared Judah and Jerusalem from the Assyrian army. He sent the angel of the Lord to wipe them out. But now it's gotten to the point where Judah is worse than Israel was. Judah's worse than the Canaanites were. Judah's Sodom and Gomorrah kind of level or worse. This is the god Molech, the evil Moabite god. This started with King Manasseh, and it seemingly ended with King Josiah, Manasseh being Hezekiah's son, Josiah being Hezekiah's great-grandson. Seemingly ended with him, but as soon as Josiah was dead, apparently it came roaring right back. And what they would do is they would go down to the Hinnom Valley. They would offer newborn babies in the fire to this god. Despicable, to kill the most innocent of society. It's just this terrible thing. And sadly, that is what we do today with abortion. Maybe not as obvious because that's often done in private, whereas this was being done in public, but still the same kind of idea. If you remember, I said there were 3 reasons why I've seen, when I've studied the Bible, 3 reasons why God places judgment upon nations. And those are often for being harmful towards Israel, sexual sins, and harming the innocent. Having a judicial system that maybe favors the rich and politically connected over just average people. or over the poor, the destitute, not taking care of widows, not taking care of orphans. Those nations with those kind of societies really upset God, and it should definitely cause us to rethink. And are we caring about the most innocent of society on an individual level, but also as a national level today? And those were the three for nations. When we talk about Israel, obviously Israel's not being judged for being harmful towards Israel. We could add in idolatry there. God didn't seem to really judge the nations in the Old Testament for idolatry if they weren't Israel and Judah. They didn't have the Bible. They didn't have the prophets teaching in these messages that you should only worship the one true God alone. But Israel and Judah are definitely accountable for that. They're also accountable to protect innocent life, and they're blatantly, belligerently destroying innocent life. I mean, descendants of David, heirs to the throne of David, being burned to detestable idols. And God is not going to let this stand. He's going to have to come to judge. And I should say, what the judgment is that there's a lot of death in the meantime, but the Jews are taken into captivity in Babylon. After they come out of captivity in Babylon, we don't see any more idolatry within Jewish communities, to the point where they didn't even allow pictures of people on the walls in most synagogues. It's forbidden. So yes, this is God working the clay. He did make the clay a bit better, and that now he's got a nation of Israel that doesn't practice idolatry, which is very much a good thing. I'm sure you can find exceptions to that rule, but by and large, they don't practice idolatry anymore. So let's look at verse 3 and say, "Hear the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah, inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. Behold, I will bring such a catastrophe on this place that whoever hears of it, his ears will tingle. Because they have forsaken me and made this an alien place, because they have burned incense in it to other gods, whom neither they, their fathers, nor the kings of Judah have known, and have filled this place with the blood of innocents. They have also built the high places of Baal to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or speak, nor did it come into my mind." Now, don't be disturbed here by it saying Baal instead of Molech. There's a lot of interchanging between various gods. There's the synchronism is not just something that happens with true religion. Of various false religions have synchronism as well. The word Baal just means Lord, and we have lots of different names for God: the Lord, the King, the on and on, the Creator, the Potter. So we shouldn't be surprised if it says Baal when we're talking about Molech. Molech means the king god also, or it's from the same root of the word that means king. So it's something related to that. Baal can also mean like owner. So don't be shocked. Also, a lot of Bible translations put this in parentheses, which means I think maybe it's like a kind of an aside anyway. It's just description of what's going on for the audience or for the readers. Verse 6. "Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that this place shall no longer be called Tophet, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter." Tophet was just another name of that particular place, or the cult site of where these sacrifices were occurring. And now it's going to be called the Valley of Slaughter, meaning the punishment is going to fit the crime here. When the Babylonians come, and there's lots of death, And there's deportations, but they're not really telling the soldiers, hey, we need to keep everybody alive because we're going to deport them all. No, many people are killed in the process, and there's multiple deportations as well. Especially the last one is the bloodiest one, where they really have the siege, and they try to like hold out against the Babylonians, and it gets nasty. It's going to be called the Valley of Slaughter, and that's where they're going to throw all the dead bodies. There's just not going to be time or people to be able to do burials, nice normal burials. So they're all going to go into the Hinnom Valley. Verse 7, and I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place, and I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies, and by the hands of those who seek their lives. Their corpses I will give as meat for the birds of heaven and for the beasts of the earth. I will make this city desolate and a hissing. Everyone who passes by it will be astonished and hiss because of all its plagues. And I will cause them to eat the flesh of their sons and the flesh of their daughters, and everyone shall eat the flesh of his friend in the siege and in the desperation with which their enemies and those who seek their lives shall drive them to despair. And I've talked before about sieges, and we've looked at other places in the Bible that show some of the consequences of sieges. But here's the thing, and I don't know what would I do if I was in a siege and I was starving to death. I like to think that I would, say, hey, I'm just going to starve to death and die rather than do any of these despicable things. But I can't possibly understand what that mindset must be like. To get to the point where you're starving so much that women are, selling their children for food, and that it gets to the point where, after you've eaten all the food, you start looking around for the pets, and you start looking around for other things. One thing talks about, instead of selling pigeons, they're now selling pigeon dung for food, because people are desperate. It's so desperate that you'll cook poop to eat. And again, you think you'd never do that, but have you been to the point where you're starving to death? I think everything suddenly starts to look appetizing, and it's just how horrible it is. And cannibalism is one of the last things. But yes, they do revert to cannibalism, and it's going to happen in this particular siege, the last deportation in Babylon, when King Zedekiah is there, and they're going to try to break out of the wall and try to escape, but there's not going to be any escape. Verse 10, then you shall break the flask in the sight of the men who go with you. We're back to that pottery vessel. And say to them, thus says the Lord of hosts, even so I will break this people in this city as one breaks a potter's vessel, which cannot be made whole again. And they shall bury them in Tophet till there is no place to bury. Thus I will do this place, says the Lord, and to its inhabitants, and make this city like Tophet, and the houses of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah shall be defiled like the place of Tophet, because of all the houses on whose roofs they have burned incense to all the host of heaven and poured out drink offerings to other gods. Many places in the Bible where the punishment fits the crime. Think of in the book of Esther, where you have Haman. He ends up dying on his own gallows that he created. Here they're saying, but your bodies are going to be in the Hinnom Valley because what you did to the bodies of those little babies. Your roofs are going to be destroyed because what you did on your roofs, you worshipped other gods. You treated those as high places. Verse 14, then Jeremiah came from Tophet, where the Lord had sent him to prophesy, and he stood in the court of the Lord's house and said to all the people, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will bring on this city and all of her towns all the doom that I have pronounced against it, because they have stiffened their necks that they might not hear my words. So on that bad note, we'll leave you till next week. God bless you.